When life flashes before us, we find something. Something that keeps us going. Something that pushes us.
Lara Croft and the Tomb Raider franchise has been a synonymous name in gaming since time immemorial. Many of the older gamers today would likely remember the classic run-and-gun action-adventure games and the now infamous locking the butler in the freezer meme. Personally, I only played a minimal amount of the originals and don't remember too much. I do know I never imprisoned that poor old butler though. One game I did play is the 2013 Reboot. In fact, I've played through the entire Reboot trilogy and enjoyed them all. I had thought my favourite was the first game, and perhaps at the time I was only just getting back into proper gaming, but something about this one just really hooked me. I wasn't that fussed about the details, but I found it super engaging and was constantly looking forward to my next session. From the puzzles to the combat, from the story to the exploration, it was all just so enjoyable. Having gone back and replayed it now though, I do feel like I may have actually judged Rise and Shadow of the Tomb Raider, the two sequels, a little too harshly because it's very evident the progress that's been made since the first game.
I'd finally set out to make my mark, to find adventure. But instead, adventure found me.
After replaying this game, I realised that it's almost like a carbon copy of Uncharted, which from memory was in itself inspired by the original Tomb Raider games, so I guess it's come full circle. Like, there's actually so many similarities, even down to the examination of the artifacts you find, though it's arguable which game has done it better. Another similarity between the two games is the traversal and movement. Though I'd say it's far from perfect, the running and jumping, the shimmying style climbing, movement and ziplining is probably one of the elements that kept me glued to the game. The only thing that annoyed me is probably the dodge button replacing the sprint. I mean, it's fine and you do get used to it, but the whole shift to sprint is so ingrained in me at this point that I'll probably never change. Though this game is very much a shorter linear experience, there's enough mixture between the exploration, combat and tombs that kept me engaged whilst not detouring too far off from the main story. The puzzles in each of the tombs does feel a bit basic, and I'd hazard a guess most people think they're a little too easy, but they can be pretty fun. There are also quite a few unique feeling areas across the 15 to 20 hours, which keeps things fresh. I do feel Tomb Raider doesn't suffer from that same open world burnout like you might get in an Assassin's Creed game when it comes to the collectibles. They're both unique and not unending, so committing the bit of time to grab them all doesn't feel as mind-numbing as it might in some other games. When it comes to enemy variety, there really isn't a huge amount to fight. For the most part, it feels like there's only like 3 or 4 different foes, including bosses, and the biggest difference between most of them is probably just the weapons. You've got your standard ranged enemies that use bows or machine guns. There's the suicidal melee guys, these riot shield types that you need to dodge, and then the really big boys that show up very infrequently. Admittedly, there isn't a huge amount of weapon variety either, and gunplay starts off feeling quite basic and almost clumsy, but it does improve as you upgrade through the story. Each weapon also has at least one secondary ammo type, which helps to add both a bit of depth and variety, but it's really nothing that will change your approach. Throughout the entire game, there really isn't anything that's especially difficult once you get used to the controls and understand the mechanics. To be fair, I did die quite a few times. I mean, I'm not very good, but that's okay, because I realized that I was just misreading the prompts, and at this point you're probably used to it. Now, this game being a reboot means this is very much the superhero origin story of Lara Croft, and with that I feel the devs really wanted a much more realistic and grounded version of our heroine. As a result, I think they've really leaned into the bow and arrow, which in my opinion handles the best out of all the weapons. Like, it actually feels really nice to use. And that's even after all the upgrades you get throughout. Having said that though, there are definitely a couple very nice fan service moments, bringing back the iconic dual pistols, so watch out for those.
I'm sorry. You can do this. Lara Croft.
From memory, the original games didn't have a huge focus on story and were mainly about gameplay. When it comes to this reboot though, the devs have really knuckled down and focused on the narrative. I feel like this game is less of a complete reinvention and more of an in-depth expansion of Lara's character. Yes, there have been obviously some pretty big changes, and with this game there's a whole new cast of characters that help to flesh out the Tomb Raider story, but it's much more of a prequel to expand and explain how the original games came to be. Of all the 3 games in the trilogy, I still feel this is the best in terms of narrative, and I really love the much more realistic and stripped down perspective. Like, with Rise, Son of Rome, both the action and story was all about the amazing spectacle and visual astonishment, but Tomb Raider is very much about the moment-to-moment gameplay, the adventure, the exploration, and the puzzles. Like, it sacrifices some of that realism for fun, and I'm all for it, because it delivers on each of those aspects. I personally didn't find all the emotional moments to land as well as they had intended, but the devs have still crafted a very layered story of growth and morality and survival. Nevertheless, there are still quite a few pretty epic set-piece moments that really help to capture the challenges and the struggles the characters go through. When it comes to the music for Tomb Raider, I feel like it's fairly well done, but definitely nothing that stands out. There are obviously some really nice bits, mainly scattered throughout the story cutscenes, but nothing as memorable as Halo or as spectacular as Hellblade, but it does its job. This sequence, for example, I thought was quite well done. Here's another pretty cool sequence. And this one, which I feel is a bit more emotional. The sound design is an aspect I think that's often overlooked in a lot of games. But as a gamer that's put a significant amount of time into Dota 2, I really appreciate the effort that's put in here. Look, obviously it's not the most important part, especially for a single player game, but I think the devs did really well when they did the sound design for Tomb Raider. Alerts and prompts are both distinctive and easily communicate what's happening in the game without being distracting. Moving on though, I personally think one of the best parts of this game is the voice work.
Finally, a little positivity. Once Reyes finishes the boat, we'll be back to civilization in no time.
Pretty much all the actors do an excellent job in my opinion.
We'll have to tell.
A tale? I hope I never hear Himiko's name again.
There aren't a huge amount of sequences where the VAs are able to show off their talents, but where they do show up, they really add an extra layer to the story.
Reyes, did you find Sam?
We're still on her trail.
I'm going to try and send an SOS from an old radio tower up here. Any tips?
Hey, Lara. You're gonna need to find the communications console. It'll look like a bunch of old switchboards.
Each voice is unique and helps to distinguish the different personalities and feelings of the characters they're portraying.
This looks like it might be an electrical problem.
You think?
Oh, hello. Hey, who's this little fox, huh?
Oh, she's cute, huh? Yes, Alicia.
Alicia.
It's my daughter.
Oh.
14 years old. And smarter than you'll ever be.
Camilla Luddington, the voice of Lara in particular, really carries the game for me, and although I still don't think all the emotional moments hit that well, the voice work is just top notch.
I remember the beach, and then it went black and I woke up in a cave. There was this crazy man Roth and a dead body.
Oh, God. Where are you now, Lara? Are you safe?
It was so horrible. It's all my fault. This is all my fault.
Lara, listen to me.
Okay, when it comes to the graphics, I feel like it's a bit of a mixed bag. For the most part, the game does well and the graphics are pretty decent, but then there are some sequences or sections where the textures are just kind of bad and Lara's character model just looks janky. Then there's some other parts like the artifacts, for example, where you can see how detailed the textures and the lighting is. Look, I think the main issue here is inconsistency. Like, this game came out the same year as Rise, Son of Rome, and the graphical difference is incomparable. Perhaps that's not a fair comparison because there's barely any depth to Rise, but still. I mean, there are definitely some really cool, detailed and well done sections, but it's definitely not a game you'd only play for the visuals in my opinion. Now, I'm not sure if this is an issue just on my end, but the aspect ratio or resolution kept playing up and I couldn't fix it. Like, I constantly had alerts popping up outside of my screen, which got kind of annoying, but it wasn't game breaking or anything. Oh, I did find, well, I'm not a sadist, I think, but with the amount of work put in for the deaths, I definitely found myself trying to see how many different death animations there were for Lara. One thing that did get really annoying was the water effects. I can only imagine the devs wanted a higher level of immersion, but the constant blocking of my vision is a real pet peeve of mine. They do it pretty consistently. Blurred water effects stopping me from playing the game just really frustrates me. I don't mind the blood spatter effect as much, but the water completely blinds me and is probably my least favourite part of the game. Moving on though, I found the art style to be pretty good. It's both unique and effective in showing off a much more grounded and realistic world for Lara to explore than previous titles, and it works. I thought the character and enemy design was also pretty well done, each one looking unique enough to tell me that I was in for a different type of combat. When it comes to the world, I think there was enough variety and differences between each section to allow them to stand out on their own. Like, each new level wasn't just another shade, but felt like its own unique location. I do, however, think they could have been more bold in the colour palette used throughout. I mean, I get they're trying to build this sense of despair and struggle, but only a few sections really made use of any real colour. I think this franchise has come a long way, and in my opinion, for the better. This reboot still definitely has that old school action-adventure Tomb Raider DNA built into it, but the developers have worked hard to ensure there's a certain maturity to this game. To me, this whole package feels like it's much more grounded and gritty and raw. Being the first title in this trilogy to focus more on this type of storytelling though, I think they've done very well, but I can't say it's the best I've seen. I love that they've tried to flesh out the story and given the characters much more focus though. Lara's actions are also much more center stage this time around, with real questions of morality and ethics and how they'll shape her into the titular Tomb Raider we all know and love. And because of that, I do recommend Tomb Raider 2013 in 2023. If you've managed to sit through this whole video, thank you so much for watching. I'm still looking to upload a brand new video once a fortnight, but be sure to let me know what else you'd like to see in the comments. Thanks again for watching. Hopefully, I'll catch you in the next one.